Alright, hello everyone, and welcome back to another Limbus Company video. Today, we are fighting Ricardo's Reflectrial with none other than the new identity of the Middle Outis. I wanted to get this video out a little earlier, but unfortunately, beating Ricardo with only using a single team is quite difficult to say the least. And it definitely took me more than a few attempts to actually get a good run, in my opinion. Of course, with that said, I did have my literal best run of beating him in 9 turns on my very first attempt, but I wasn't recording that one, so unfortunate. And it's like, honestly, this fight, it's not that bad to beat with only the middle. Part of it is because it's quite literally designed, specifically the first phase is designed to be beaten with the middle. But with how quickly Ricardo ramps up and all of the chip damage that you're constantly taking in the fight, all it takes is a single mistake and you're back at square one. And that happened multiple times. For example, in one of them, and I'm going to show it right here, is I accidentally lost a clash with the Queen of Hatred, and she corroded and then killed everybody. Pretty typical Queen of Hatred behavior if you ask me. But yeah, that's how that run died. Very cool. Love that. In any case, this is a pretty good showcase of the Middle Outis and what she's actually capable of, because she is a very, very powerful identity. Specifically once she removes all of the seals on Levatian. Because as you'll see later on in the video, she can do upwards of like nearly 1,500 damage, which is pretty unheard of for an identity outside of the mirror dungeon. Of course, the actual major problem with her, and the thing that keeps her at least somewhat balanced, is the fact that it takes a substantial amount of effort to actually unseal Levatian. Because the only way for her to actually remove seals is if she reaches 0 on her Rising Fever status effect, which is literally only there just to keep track of how far along she is with the unsealing of her sword. There are only 2 ways for her to actually reduce that status effect, and that's by either using her skill 3 or by having a 6+ Envy Absolute Resonance. Of course, it only happens once per turn, so typically speaking, both the 6+ Envy Absolute Resonance and the skill 3 use are kind of one and the same, because since she, like most middle identities, can use her skill 3 as a defense skill, specifically when there is a 6+ Absolute Resonance, all you need to do is activate her counter skill, and as long as there is the Envy Resonance, well, it completes both of those conditionals at the same time. The only difference between them is that when she uses her skill 3, it reduces it immediately, but the Envy Resonance, if you are not using her skill 3, then it happens at the end of the turn. And that part there specifically makes her entire gimmick quite clunky, in my opinion, and very, very unintuitive. And the reason why is because once she does reach 0 of Rising Fever, then she uses her Time to Unpack skill, and that skill specifically is what changes the seal state on her sword. Or at least it's supposed to. I have no idea why, but later on in this video you'll see that there is an entire turn where Outis is sitting at 0 of her Rising Fervor status effect, and yet for some reason she just never uses her Time to Unpack skill, despite the fact that she absolutely should have. I even used a skill 3 in that very same turn, but for some unknowable reason, she just doesn't do it. And I have literally no idea why. Her passive literally states, at 0 Rising Fever stack, use Time to Unpack as an unopposed attack at skill end. Turn end at 0 Rising Fever stack, and if this unit failed to use Time to Unpack in that turn, use Time to Unpack at the next turn's combat start. That is the conditional for her to actually use her unpacking skill. Those are the only conditionals for using that skill. And yet, despite the fact that she was absolutely at 0 Rising Fervor, she doesn't use it. I have no explanation for why. It's definitely got to be some kind of very strange and obscure bug that I ran into or something. That's the only explanation I can think of, but having an unexplainable bug, it definitely does not help make her gimmick even easier to understand. And it definitely sucks because if it actually worked how it said it did, then this run could have probably been beaten in 8 turns, honestly. But unfortunate, I suppose. Other than that, though, the best way to play her is to literally just spam your defense skill every single turn so that she can use her skill 3 every single turn, and that guarantees that you always lose the Rising Fever status effect, and you will always be able to use her time to unpack skill in the quickest and most efficient manner possible. In total, it takes her a minimum of 5 turns in order to actually unpack Levatian, which is honestly somewhat reasonable, considering how much stronger it makes her when she does have access to it. However, it is still a ridiculously long amount of time, and for the most part, she won't ever be able to actually utilize it in a normal fight. Typically only in like really, really hard bosses can she actually take advantage of it. And also, because the only way for her to actually efficiently unseal her sword is by spamming defense skills, that means that she's only really capable of doing this in the Envy Resonance team. I mean, it's kind of self-explanatory when literally both of the 2 ways she loses Rising Fever is directly tied to Envy Absolute Resonance, but because of that, she's very dependent on this specific team, and as such, I wouldn't really use her outside of it. Of course, you still can. She is a decent burn and bleed identity at the end of the day, even without having access to Levatian in its true form. But for the most part, she is, like most middle identities, substantially weaker outside of the Envy Resonance team. Which is somewhat of a good thing, honestly, because it means that sacrificing her to Ryoshu's House of Spiders identity is not that detrimental, because she's not going to contribute much in the first place, so feeding her to Ryoshu is perfectly acceptable, and there's no real downside to it. This is the turn I was talking about, by the way, where she starts with 0 Rising Fervor and doesn't use time to unpack, despite the fact that she absolutely should have. Honestly, though, it's not really like it changed much about how this fight actually played out, because on the next turn, Gregor gets a horrible speed roll, and because he's staggered, it means that I cannot activate a 6+ Envy Absolute Resonance on the next turn, so even though she does end up using time to unpack on the next turn, and therefore could have utilized Levatian to its fullest potential in that turn, she would not be able to use a skill 3 because I cannot activate an Envy Resonance on that turn. Thanks to Gregor getting staggered with an absolutely terrible speed roll on that turn. Honestly, it would be nice if staggered characters automatically roll minimum speed, like no matter what. Or like their speed tier is set to 1. That way they cannot interfere with things like the Envy Resonance. Ultimately, the strangeness of Otis's gimmick did not really impact the outcome of this fight that much, and it definitely did not because of Gregor's unlucky speed roll, but what can you do? In any case, she's got a lot going on, a lot more than I'm willing to go into in this particular video, but all you need to know is she is a very, very strong identity, and is absolutely one you want to have if your favorite team happens to be the Envy Absolute Resonance team.
방금 공격.
그렇지.
다음에 다른 개체에게도
바로
다시
그거다,
해줄래?
딸렘.
영상으로 남기면 다른 직원에게도 도움이 될지도 몰라.
그래, 내가 왔다.
불사이군.
방금 공격은 좋았어. 이대로만 계속해보면 좋을 텐데.
통상 배터리 일시방전.
징계팀 직원이라면 당연한 판단이긴 해. 잘했다는 칭찬은 생략하는 게 더 공감 맞지? 야! 필살! 바이올렛 브레이크 슬램!
해냈구나.
나가봐라.
나라도 그랬을 거야.
웃기지 마. 거창을 새겨주지.
나는 다른 선배들처럼 복잡한 생각은 잘 못하니까.
노래 더 키워.
와, 방금 건 엄청 고통스러웠겠다. 그 고통과 미움을 똑같이 적에게 돌려줘 볼까?
셔리, 꺼져.
재밌었다. 자, 오늘 할 거 다 끝난 거 맞지?
Anyway, that's it for me. Like and subscribe for more videos like this one, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.